welcome to everybody who's watching, journalists, retailers, viewers and reviewers. And welcome most of all to Dani Redd and Emma Cowell. Great to see you here. And on behalf of all
Sue.
authors, welcome to Avon.
Thank you.
So what the three of us have in common is that we've all written books set in locations outside the UK. So let's start with Emma. Can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming novel, One Last Letter from Greece, and the setting you chose?
Yeah, of course. So my debut novel is out next May, which is very exciting. And it's set on the Greek mainland in a place called Methone, which is a real place. And it's a sweeping, evocative story of love and loss, fate and destiny, about a girl called Sophie who's coming to terms with the death of her mother. And she's led to Greece to uncover a family secret, and along the way finds much, much more than she ever bargained for, including romance, which is lovely. I have taken a little bit of geographical license with the placements of the towns and villages around the southwestern Peloponnese, but it's a place I know and love very well. I've been going there for about 10 years, and I really should work for the Greek Tourist Board. I'm obsessed. I'm like an evangelist because so many people go to the islands and are familiar with the Greek islands, but the mainland is absolutely stunning. And the first time I went there, I felt a real connection with the place, and whether that was born of the fact I was obsessed with Greek myths and legends as a child, there was sort of, I felt like I belonged there, and it was the perfect place to set my novel.
That sounds brilliant. It's just fantastic to have that kind of engagement with somewhere, I think. With me, it's always somewhere hot and sunny as well. But Dani, yes. The Arctic Curry Club is not set somewhere hot and sunny. I didn't even know that this island existed. So would you like to tell us something about your novel and why there?
Yeah, so I was doing a PhD in island studies, and I've always been really fascinated by remote cold islands in the middle of nowhere. Don't ask me why. And so I went to this one, and I kind of, yeah, I find it a really interesting place. So for 4 months of the year, there's complete darkness. And the settlement where you live, you have to, if you want to leave it, you have to have a rifle because of the threat of polar bears outside the settlement. So yeah, I found it really interesting, and I thought it could be written about more. So I did, because a lot of narratives in the Arctic are often based around exploration. So I wanted to do something a bit more uplifting and different.
It really is different. It's a small Norwegian island, right? And I just didn't know. I know Norway's a kind of a bit frilly around the edges, but I didn't know about that place. Destination fiction is a form of armchair travel, an escapist read. But do you think there are any other reasons for readers to read non-UK settings? What do they like, do you think? Sorry, let's start with Emma again.
So I think the joy of being a reader and reading a book set in another setting, and as a writer, is that you get to research another culture, another lifestyle, and all the traditions that go with the place you've chosen to set your novel. And I think for me, with Greece, I have the added bonus that my main character, Sophie, is a chef. So all in the name of research, I immersed myself in the cooking culture of Greece and gorged on baklava, yamistis, imambayaldi, all these fabulous Greek dishes, put on a considerable amount of weight in the process as well. But I think for me, Greece is such a sensory place. And Sue, as you said about hot and sunny, that feel of the sun on your skin, the smell in the air. And I think to try and capture that for somebody who maybe has never been there, to bring it alive, is a real joy to do. But alongside that, you're also mindful that you're paying tribute to another culture. You're writing someone else's life. And for me, it's important to be authentic about that and acknowledging conventions and religion, customs, which is also a very rich vein to tap into, because it can be that setting for conflict amongst characters. So there's a lot, I think, to be said for traveling away far in your mind as an author and as a reader.
Yeah, I think it's nice as a reader to learn something about a different place and like test it out. Would I like to go there on holiday, or shall I go back to Malta? How about you, Dani? What do you think readers get from that armchair travel?
Well, I think I basically agree with Emma in all points that she said. I think it's really easy to get caught up in your own everyday life and the kind of culture around you and the conventions around you. And I think it's quite enriching to step beyond that and kind of travel somewhere different, sort of emotionally. And definitely relating to the food, I think that's also a really good entry point into a different culture. The reason why I wrote about Indian food in my book is because I lived in India for a couple of years, and as someone who likes remote islands, it was quite a difficult place for me to be. I didn't really know how to engage with the culture, and so when I started cooking Indian food, my mother-in-law taught me recipes. Then I started to kind of learn a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all, books give you everything really, don't they? Let's start with Dani this time. What other destinations would you like to write about? Is there some country crying out to you, write about me, please?
Well, at the moment, the book that I'm writing, it's actually just set in the UK. But in the future, I'm quite interested in writing a speculative historical fiction. And there's an archipelago in Yemen called Socotra, where these dragon trees grow that are really kind of interesting. And yeah, I think that would probably be my next spot.
And you're going to research it?
I hope so. Yeah, I'd love to go there.
That's the idea, isn't it? Let's
That's
travel
reason.
again. How about you, Emma? You're obviously very engaged with Greece, but is there somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, I think my second book that I'm starting to tinker around with at the moment will also be set in the mainland Greece in a different part. But I think there's something I'd like to write, perhaps set in a city, because book one and book two are going to be in very rural, seaside, tranquil havens. And I think setting something in a city like Rome or even Athens or New York, just you get a different tempo and pace for your characters' heartbeat, their lives roll over differently, don't they? So yeah, possibly a city at some point.
No, I don't think I've done many cities. I always like out of the way places as well. So I find it hard to do my best work on a novel if I haven't been to the place. Although I know that other authors seem to be able to write really convincingly just from their online research. How about you? So do you visit the places you write about, or do you think you could do a good job if you didn't visit? Emma, we'll go with this time.
I don't have much of a benchmark given that my debut is out next May. So I don't know, Sue, I bow to your wisdom and your experience. But I think what I mentioned about before about the authenticity, about writing someone else's experience or your character's experience of a foreign culture to your own. For me, I would want to immerse myself in that and really take it in and try and bring that to life on paper. And earlier this summer, I was finishing the final edits on my novel and sitting in the place where it's set, looking out to sea and watching a fisherman cross the bay snaring sardines. I'm experiencing, and then I can pour that beauty and that enthusiasm into the page. So I think for me, any excuse to pack a suitcase, right, and go somewhere and travel again. But I think for me, I would have to be there and soak up the sights and sounds of somewhere.
Yeah. I find, even though I know Malta very well, having lived there and written about it quite a lot and written while I'm there, there's always something you find out through going back. And that's what I tell the tax man, and I'm sticking to that. So, Dani, how about you? Have you written anywhere? I know this is your debut with Avon, but have you written anything else set somewhere else where you didn't research it? Do you think you could do a good job?
I don't think I could personally. Firstly, because I really enjoy research and I really enjoy travel, so it would make sense to do it. It wouldn't really occur to me to write about a place that I'd never visited, and I wouldn't feel a kind of connection or imperative. So I'm definitely the same as you guys.
Yeah.
And I also think it's definitely a privilege to be able to travel and write about things. But you can also something I've been doing this pandemic is becoming more acquainted with my local area as well. Like you can kind of travel locally and discover new things about where you live and write about that, and that can be quite that could be quite fertile as well, which is why the next book I'm writing is actually set in where I grew up, like my kind of childhood
Yeah.
area.
I found that because my summer books normally are set away, and I've written 2 of them now during the pandemic, the only thing I could do is set them in places where I've been and set previous books, because then I've got a library of research, and I've made friends and acquaintances who will answer all my brainless questions on emails and what have you. Dani, let's begin with you this time. What about different genres? Do you fancy it, writing in a different genre, or do you really like where you are?
I really enjoy writing in different genres. I think that I think of the story and the idea first, and it's only later that I would realize, oh, that's psychological thriller, which is, yeah, that's actually what's happened. I'm writing a psychological thriller next, so.
Wow. That sounds, I don't know quite how people do it. I think the only thing I could do was write about Formula One, and that's mainly just because I want an excuse.
I'd read it.
Someone in Formula One. How about you, Emma? Another genre or not?
I mean, possibly. Never say never in the future. I think my second book will be contemporary women's fiction, love, romance, and women's stories from women's points of view. But I think I probably do have a psychological thriller lurking somewhere within, and it may be healthy to get it out at some point. But I think for now, I'm going to stay put where I am. But we'll see.
I always wonder what people's family members think. You know, what are you writing about today, Mum? Well, it's about my son who wouldn't tidy his room, and so.
Right.
Do you have any personal book recommendations, Dani, for novels that whisked you away somewhere that really stays with you?
Yeah, I've got one for India and I've got one for the Arctic. So the one for the Arctic is by Christiane Ritter, and it's called A Woman in the Polar Night. And it's a memoir from the 1930s about a painter who went to join her husband in the Arctic for a year. So that's actually a really crazy book. It's really good. And Amitav Ghosh, The Hungry Tide would be my recommendation for India, because it's just like, I think it's probably my favorite book. It's really glorious.
It sounds wonderful. How about you, Emma?
I think, well, one of the writers who inspired me years and years ago, it's about 25 years ago, I picked up Big Stone Gap by Adriana Trigiani. She's an American writer, and there's a trilogy actually in the series. And it's set in Big Stone Gap, which is a coal mining town in Virginia. I've never been, but it was almost like another character in the book. It was so vivid, and the way she described the sense of place, and it's where she grew up, so she knew it so well. Yeah, I felt the real strength of that sense of place from her.
So somebody's just asked, sorry, something I've totally forgotten again, hang on. How long does it take you to come up with a story? I'm on like 2 books a year, so the answer to everything is 6 months. But how about you guys? Dani?
Well, I work full time, so I think it's probably, I don't know, maybe a book every 18 months.
Wow.
If working full time.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine I was lucky enough not really to have to do that, because I worked in the evenings. So Emma, a question: do you have any advice for someone who wants to write a novel?
Oh my goodness. I think just get it out, get the story out, because I think from start to finish, and One Last Letter from Greece was sort of my lockdown project. I gave up sourdough baking quite early on in the pandemic, which I was grateful for. And I just, in March, when it all began, just started to revisit this story idea I'd had and just got it out. And I probably am doing it all the wrong way, with no expert advice or tuition. Perhaps people plot everything out and then start writing. I just as I went along and just found this story and the characters, and I didn't know how it was going to end when I started. It just evolved. It was a painful process, let me say, many terse discussions with my husband. He was like, why don't you know what happens at the end? Because I don't know what I'm doing, but we got there. So from March to sort of October last year was what the bulk of writing the book from scratch, and then tinkering and editing. over the next few months. So I don't think I've given anyone any advice apart from just do it, see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we've run out of time, I believe. So I would like to hand back over to Ellie, and thank you both, Dani and Emma, very much. It's been a pleasure. I wish we could have gone on.
Oh, thank you so much, Sue.
Thanks.